So if you checked out our review from last week of the first 2 episodes of Star Trek Discovery, you know we really didn't care,
like it.
Didn't care for it really as a Star Trek series or as a series in general. But I think we both agree this
one's much better.
Much better, much closer to what we were hoping on the positive end of what things could be. So let's talk about it. Hey guys, Sean Chandler here, and this is my sister. We're both lifelong Star Trek fans, new Star Trek show, so we decided to do this together to talk about it. So before we dive into it and give our thoughts on everything, I want you to chime in down below in the comments section. Let us know what you thought about the episode. Let us know what you think about this new version of Trek. If you're a purist, any of that stuff, let us know what you think about our insane personalities. We are totally open to whatever you want to talk about, but we promise we're going to be a lot more positive. We really did like this episode a lot more. We're going to start off on the negative side, just so you can know our heart and where we're coming from, but we really did like it. We're going to praise a whole bunch of stuff on the latter half, just so you know if you were kind of burned by the last episode. All right, let's get talking about it. Now, if you tuned in last week, we really
didn't like
it. And we had like 2 different videos, 15 minutes each, pretty well trashing them. And one of the things we said in the second video was that it felt like all of that was build up to the actual show.
Yes, and that they were basically... everything that happened before we were supposed to forget. Well, not forget. It was 2 hours of exposition.
Yeah, exposition.
To set up something that probably would have worked better as a flashback. And so we left last week going, hopefully this coming week is going to be much better because they've finished their 2 hours of exposition.
Yes. And then it ended with a trailer for the rest of the season. We went, oh,
this is the show we wanted to see.
This I'm okay with. It's
this
different.
Looks interesting.
I'll be annoyed as the guy that owns, still has my 5 1/4 inch Star Trek game from 25 years ago that was 25 years after as the person that has that, I'll be annoyed by things. But this is the show I'll be okay with. Whereas these first 2 episodes, I was like, I don't know what I'm watching. And then we got today's episode, and it was.
Yeah, it was. If we were watching it as a completely independent sci-fi series, we would have been like, "This is really awesome. I'm curious where it's going." As a Star Trek, we're still on the fence to see what's going to end up happening because it almost has the tone of Star Trek, but it's still early. Much like Next Gen was finding its feet the first few episodes, and that's kind of how I'm treating it. It's still finding its feet.
Yes. And this felt like Star Trek Into Darkness-esque to me. In that militarized Starfleet, some Star Trek-y type things, but then some things that are very not Star Trek kind of in there. And that I got vibes of that quite a bit.
Yes, I did too.
And the big notes I wrote down was like I just kept going. The heart of Star Trek, which was this discovery research, and the whole, especially the first half of this episode, war, develop weapons, and then with the heart of Star Trek, Gene Roddenberry
and then went into horror.
Yeah, and then the horror
episode, which felt odd as the first episode with our main cast.
And then, it was pretty odd. And then, likewise, Gene Roddenberry's Utopia, his sort of idea that we progressed beyond certain conflicts.
Petty conflicts.
And then this episode is...
all petty conflicts.
All petty conflicts. People just being, like, as you phrased it, misplaced blame as for the beginning of the war.
Yes.
Which you could say you wouldn't like her because she's a mutineer, but being like, you started the war.
It was very obvious watching it that she didn't start the war.
Yeah,
that's what they took.
And so we're starting all this kind of on the negative to say that we're going to move on to the positive, but that's kind of where we're coming from. Why we were so nitpicky in our first 2 videos, and while we'll probably drift towards nitpicking, is because we love Star Trek. And we watch this, it says Star Trek, there's hints of the show, the thing that we could love, and then there's things about it we go, at the heart of what Star Trek is, you're not that. Because the heart of Star Trek wasn't Kirk, it wasn't Spock, it's not the Enterprise, that's the original thing, a great thing, but it's this world that you can tell many stories in, and when it doesn't feel like that world, that's where, as a Star Trek fan, you go, what are you doing?
The big thing about Star Trek was it was hopeful, and... it's not quite there yet. You see the hints of it, you see the idea of it, but one of the big things that Gene Roddenberry was big on, would talk about a lot, was the fact that they had moved beyond the petty jealousies and all of those types of things. And that's what we saw a lot of in this episode was petty angers. Oh, it's the mutineer. Lurker. Move out of the way, Lurker. And it felt like...
oh, we have assigned seats. We have assigned seats.
So that there was some little bits that were really odd, and I'm really curious how they're going to work the whole idea of trying to come up with a biological drive into the entire timeline, because this feels like tech that's way in advance of where they're supposed to be. So I was like, okay, I don't know how you're going to work this in. And there was also some things that were inconsistent with just the chronology. Like they mentioned, oh, it was over in the beta quadrant 70 light years away. And as they've set up previously, the galaxy is set up into 4 quadrants, and 70 light years is not going to be in a different quadrant.
Yeah.
So there was just little things that feel slightly off, like they hadn't done their homework.
Yeah, and the thing is, I mentioned this in a comment with someone before, when you call it Star Trek, and you're building a show to try and pull in old fans, that's why you call it Star Trek, we come in with prior knowledge. And so when you start using the language, this is what a Klingon is, this is what a quadrant is, and this many light years, as soon as you start saying things like that, that means something to us. So in our brain, we open the file for Klingon, we open the file for quadrant, we open the file for transport, what, I don't even have a word for it, I don't have a third example. But we start thinking about something, and so when the show uses that language and we start, okay, this is where this is heading, and then it goes somewhere different,
We're confused.
Like, we can't follow. It's like someone said, hey, why don't you stop nitpicking all the details of the canon and start focusing on the characters in the story? Well, it's hard to do that when they're like referencing a war and 100 years without seeing Klingons and all sorts of things. We're going, wait, so does this tie in? Is this the same? When there's so many references that don't connect, that's where there's a problem. All right, so that's our end of our kind of a nitpicking or like where we're frustrated. Moving forward, we're going to talk the positive, what we liked about it, and with the assumption of it's not old Trek.
Yes.
So just reviewing this as a new series, not even a new Star Trek series, just a new sci-fi series. What did you like?
I thought that the captain was a very intriguing character. He had enough mystery and enough drive to really make me want to know more about him. The person who is now the first officer came off a lot better than he did in the pilot episode. In the pilot episode, his character was incredibly frustrating and
insufferable. Just contrary and like,
why is this person someone a trusted voice on the bridge? Whereas in this episode, you saw him as a competent character, not one who was running scared, and that's what he was doing in the pilot episode. So they've brought in a lot of interesting characters. The cadet who was on the crew, I liked her as someone who's got a lot of drive and ambition, but also recognizes that she doesn't know enough. And they showed her as an immature, younger character. So, like, she was the one who made the comment about the assigned stations. And she came back and admitted later that, I'm sorry, I just didn't want to have everyone think that we were friends and I'm feeling insecure. And that showed interesting character development. I'm still on the fence with the main character, mainly because she's been written inconsistently.
Yeah.
So she's either written as very logical or very emotional, and the pendulum swings depending on what they need for that scene, and she's got a lot of potential as a character. I would like her to be written consistently so that I don't feel like there's a change in how she's being portrayed. I think she's got possibilities. She's just not there yet.
Right. And I think they seem kind of a little bit torn on what they want to do with her, because so Vulcan tied to Sarek in the pilots episodes, and like there's like none of that here. Yeah. And so they're like things that were like really annoying and odd about the first episodes, with so many like mind meld flipping back and forth stuff that was kind of pretty off-putting about it. Here wasn't there, and so I could just like enjoy the character as she was, without weird kind of trippy stuff tying into it. And I mean, it's always kind of fun to have the characters that it's essentially kind of what they did with Kirk in the JJ Trek, of making him the rogue guy that kind of accidentally gets on the ship and he's just so talented that he takes command. Yes. They're doing that with her character in a different sort of way, of course, but they're doing that way, and it's an arc that you kind of makes you naturally root for the character, and especially because we know the backstory, we're rooting for her for that reason of knowing that she wasn't trying to start a war, whatever
they're pinning on her right now.
And for me, I was just watching this episode thinking, if I were to recommend the show to someone, I think I would tell them, skip the first 2 episodes. I think
I probably would too.
I think if you just start with this episode, it works.
And it gives you enough background that you don't have to have seen the previous 2 episodes, or watch a few episodes to get into the arc and get the feel, and then go back. Because right now, if you were to start off with those first 2 episodes, you're not going to watch anymore. Yeah. I mean, tonight I came over by myself. My husband stayed home, and all 3 of my kids stayed home because they were just like, I don't want to watch it anymore.
Yeah,
which
is not a good sign.
It's not a good sign when you have 12 and 10-year-olds who are like, it's just not good, mommy.
Right.
So. And
I would imagine, like, this is, I just watched it and just being like, from the get-go, from the very beginning, I was like, this just feels right. Whereas the last one from the get-go, I just like, this doesn't feel right. Yeah. And I think it's the inherent nature of the first 2 episodes, or the one pilot 2-parter thing, was designed as setup. These characters, we're not going to stick around with them. Mm-hmm. All this Klingon stuff, that's not what the show's actually like. I mean, that whole first episode just keeps cutting back and forth between expository in Klingon on their ship, them standing there just lecturing as Klingons, and that's not what that's not what the show is like. I don't.
So think. When Star Trek Next Generation finally started getting good was in 3rd season, when they had a new showrunner come in and take over, and basically every time they pitched an episode, he would say, okay, whose story is this? And they'd have to be able to pin it on a main character. They couldn't just say, oh, well, we have this cool idea of a concept. And so that's the problem with that first episode.
Yeah, very much so.
It's not a Michael story. It's not the captain story. It's not the science officer story.
It's not a Klingon story.
And it's not a Klingon story.
It's not a Sarek story.
It's just a story that kind of goes up and down and all over, whereas this episode was a Michael story. Yep. It was very clearly progressing her story arc, and that's why this episode worked, because we were focusing on one character, and it was an interesting character. It was a little weird to get into horror for the 3rd episode of Star Trek, but it worked, just wouldn't have been my personal choice. No. So it did make me glad that my 10-year-old daughter wasn't here, because she would have totally flipped out at the scenes with the bodies.
Which would have made the whole evening more fun for me, but because I'm mean-spirited like that.
Would not have made it fun for me tonight when my daughter suddenly woke me up at 2 a.m. going, Mommy, I can't sleep. And I scream in terror.
So overall...
It is significantly better.
A show like those first 2 episodes, if I just saw those and wasn't planning on doing this, I'd been like, I don't know about this.
Yeah.
I saw this episode. Yeah, I dig this. I dig it totally.
It was night and day. It is amazing the difference one single episode makes between the 2 things.
Which goes back to almost everything we were saying in that second video about like why did they launch this like this? Because you could have done like a 10, maybe even 15-minute prologue on this episode, showing up the setup of the war.
Yeah.
And you just summarize those first 2 episodes.
Yeah, if you had just done that as a 15-minute intro, or done this like as an hour-and-a-half episode, and you done it like 25 minutes, it would have been much better. That's the part that's just getting me.
Nice and condensed. And just you go back to, you set up the entire Kelvin universe in that 10-minute intro to Star Trek 2009, and everyone, like, it's amazing.
It is amazing.
You set up so much, and it's emotionally resonant because it's just to the point. And so you have kind of maybe just do the mutiny. You see Michelle Yeoh die, and like it's just.
I want to see someone recut those episodes as a 10-minute prologue. Please, somebody do that. I will love you. That would be awesome to see.
Use the Michael Giacchino score from Star Trek 2009.
Oh, that would be amazing.
And
we'd sell it so much better.
Yeah, they should have added us to the writer's room. We could have been great showrunners. We could
have told them how to promo it better also. Because, I mean, I went into this going, I'm watching it because it's Star Trek.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm really scared because nobody who's said anything about it acts like they know about Star Trek. For the first time, it's going to be a diverse show.
What?
So,
like the people from that article you read like, the most woke Star Trek show. Like, what? Have you ever seen Star Trek? Like,
that article hurt me.
So anyway, closing out. Did you have any final thoughts on it? I mean, obviously we kind of summarized a little bit. So.
Yeah. I'm curious to see where this storyline goes. They have me a little worried with the tag that they did at the end of the episode of they're going to turn Jason Isaacs' character into a bad guy. And that I'm not quite so down with, because we had joked back when they first announced him as the captain that this was like, I shared this with Sean, and Sean came back with, oh, you know what they're going to do with the storyline? What's going to happen is they're going to have Jason Isaacs turn out to be this evil captain who is trying to overthrow the Federation, and the rest of the culturally diverse crew will band together and overthrow him. The evil white male captain is going to try and overthrow the Federation. And
then they set that up at the end of the episode.
And they set that up at the end of the episode, and I don't want them to do that. He looks like an interesting character, and I'd really hate for them to go with that trope that's just become a really popular thing right now.
Well, and that's because it ended, and the immediate comment I went, oh, it's the year 2017. You have to have the final tag on at the end with the twist reveal that, oh, their motives weren't so pure. They've got a secret. Like, all right, I saw that for 10 years on Smallville. That's not cutting edge. It's not like, wow, look what Star Trek came up with. We've seen it done so many times by now. Mm-hmm. And what's to kind of the starting point of the heart of Star Trek, the idea that the captain is this guy with sinister things, that it's a warmonger. That's just not Star Trek to me. So as a show, definitely I give it a thumbs up. As a Star Trek show, we'll go the sideways. It's kind of Into Darkness Trek, as I mentioned before. It's like Star Trek-y things in there, but at the heart of it, something's very not right.
Not feeling right.
And like Into Darkness, I thoroughly enjoyed Into Darkness as just a movie more so than a Star Trek movie. I enjoyed this as a TV show. I
got mad about the whole con thing, so...
I'm less of the purist. But anyway, how about you guys? Tell us down below what you thought. We'd love to hear your thoughts on it. You guys had lots of opinions last week. Lots of insults, lots of praises. Like, finally someone that gets it. You guys are idiots. You made me dumber. I love to read that stuff. I just get a kick out of the...
I still want to know, is it me that's annoying or the main character? I may actually not want to know, but there's this part of me that is a glutton for punishment and wants to know... Is it me that's annoying? I'm so cute. Or is it the main character of the show?
So we will find out. Let us know in the comment sections what you think about us, as well as what you think about this show. Also, if you're new to my channel, please consider clicking that subscribe button. I do movie reviews, TV reviews, like the one you're watching right now. Also do ranking videos, but the key thing is I don't want to just talk about movies and TV. I want to talk about movies and TV with you. So please join us in the comment section. Let's have a lively discussion, and thank you for watching.